Grew to Intel and all these other companies. I'm mispronouncing the name, but anyway, it all happened right there. And he, when teenagers were idolizing pop stars and Elvis and the Beatles and all that stuff, he idolized Hewlett and Packard.
Yeah.
And apparently Lamb.
Edwin Lamb was. I don't know if this is true. There's articles going around that was his true idol. I don't know if that's true.
But in addition to the technology influences, and this is something you rarely hear people talking about, he was also influenced by other aspects of the Bay Area. One of them being a sense of optimism about the future that existed in California at that time, which I remember personally. I grew up in Southern California, and it was just overwhelming sense of optimism. Nowadays, all these emo kids are walking around.
We don't remember that, but that's really true. I was working in San Jose in radio in the late 70s, and there was this sense, this excitement. You had Atari, you had Apple, IBM was there. It was really happening.
Yeah, and in addition to that, this sort of the hippie thing from San Francisco and Berkeley, the radicalism of Berkeley and Oakland, all this stuff was in the air, and he took all that in and integrated into his total personality. And so you can't really understand Jobs without understanding all of that, and the degree to which he really was a pure product of Southern.
I think that's a very good point. Yeah, I think you're right. Can Apple survive the loss of Steve Jobs, Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, I think they already have, in a sense. I mean,
short term, of course. Short term, I mean, Steve set the tone and set the. I'm sure the product line for the next few years is already set.
Yes.
But what about
within the consumer electronics industry? You're assuming that Steve was, very personally involved, until the end or close to the end. You'll see his hand in products for the next 2 years. Right. It goes out that far. But I think, the important things were trying to instill the way that he thinks and works and, the culture that I think he wanted Apple to become. When he first left earlier this year, I wrote, a piece then, and I've heard the sentiment that I was kind of basing it all around. I called the piece "Living in Steve's House," and the sentiment was basically he built this house, and it's not Scully's house anymore. Right? It's Steve's house, and everyone who comes into Steve's house is going to be thinking about him and what would Steve do.
Can't that be a negative though? I mean, Paul Thurrott said that's what happened to Microsoft. They kept saying, "What would Bill do? What would Bill do?" and nothing evolved. Couldn't that be a downside to this?
Well, I mean, I think that the culture is different, and Bill is not Steve.
Oh, that's true.
So, I mean, that may be the case, but I wouldn't worry about it too much, because I think part of Steve.
If you could come up with the right answer to what would Steve do? I mean,
right, exactly. I think that's what it is.
That's not easy. Right?
No.
You look at Disney. Guy Kawasaki, I heard him on CNBC saying, "I was just at Disneyland." Obviously, Disney survived Walt Disney with its image intact. In fact, it's not true. Disney almost went under after Disney died. They went through a very bad period. It wasn't until Iger came along that really they were able to turn themselves into a very different company. Disneyland may preserve Walt's vision, but that's about it. I don't see anybody in the current executive suite that has anywhere near Steve's vision or creativity or even taste.
I think that's unfair because we just don't know the executives there. We've never gotten a chance to know them because it's always been the Steve show.
Tim Cook is a great logistics guy. That's why he's there.
But genuinely, I don't know that Tim does not have his vision. But I just don't. I can't say that confidently.
We do know that he doesn't have his impact.
Go ahead,
his influence over people in the company.
Go ahead.
I think Tim Cook. There was a story that came out shortly after Tim Cook was named CEO about him dispatching a worker to China who, to begin some of the work that was done there early on with establishing the factories there, and it was a very Steve Jobs-like statement. He said to the guy, "Okay, we need to do this," and he spoke to someone else, and he turned and he looked to the guy and says, "Why are you still sitting here?" And that's very Jobs-like.
Yeah.
And I think that Tim Cook has kind of the profiles that we saw of him after he was named. He has kind of this spine of steel, this gentlemanly Alabama nature to him, but very forceful and in a quiet way. And I think if you combine that, we forget about Johnny Ive, who is the design and usability. He is the probably one side of Steve's brain, and Tim Cook is the other. And I think what Apple should hope for is that those two guys mind meld if they haven't already. I think those two are it.
Jobs surrounded himself with great people. He did on the Macintosh team. I mean, he was clearly very good at that. But I think in every respect, he was the leader that they needed to get the very best out of themselves. Yeah. And I agree, we don't know Ryan because we haven't seen these guys. But I have to think that Jobs is a truly unique individual.
Absolutely.
And it's highly unlikely that there's another Steve Jobs lurking there.
Sure.
Let me put it this way. Steve Jobs would have never worked for Steve Jobs. If there's a man with Steve Jobs drive, that's right. If there's a man with Steve Jobs drive in that number 2 position, what the hell's he doing there? Because that's not the kind of person that works for Steve Jobs. So I think there's almost the nature of the environment is that when you have a Steve Jobs, the people who are surrounding him are not.
The only point that I'm trying to make is that, well, there's a couple. One, Apple doesn't necessarily need Steve Jobs at this point to go on and thrive. I mean, okay,
there may be enough momentum there to continue.
Let's say that Apple now becomes 80% as good as it was with Steve Jobs at the height in the past 10 years. That's still going to make it 50% better than number 2.
It's a good point.
The other supposition here is that you need to find a replacement. Nobody's going to replace anybody. If Johnny Ive went back to England tomorrow, you couldn't replace Johnny Ive. But you move forward, and I think Steve made it his personal goal to ensure. I mean, he knew he was going. He knew he was on his way out. And he made it his personal goal to ensure that his legacy would live on. I mean, that's what you want as a founder. That you care about the legacy of your company.
That's what you hope for. I just wonder how easy that is to do. I keep hearing
not easy at all.
He injected his DNA and so forth. And certainly, I'm sure he shared with all these guys. There's a story, somebody told me, an Apple employee told me that in his last days on campus, Steve took a walk with Tim Cook and and made sure that everybody saw him walking the campus going like this, and then that, and I want you to do that, and we're going to be doing that. Almost to say, I am passing along the plan to Tim to implement. That's the kind of thing, you're right, a founder wants to do, but I think it's so hard to really continue.
Look at the stories that people are telling about Steve Jobs. Here's just one typical story. Originally, the front of the original iPhone was supposed to be plastic, a very high-grade, high-tech form of plastic. And everybody said it had to be plastic. It made sense from a manufacturing point of view, from a durability point of view, everybody said it had to be plastic, and it was going to be plastic.
Right.
And at the very last minute, Steve Jobs says, you know what, I can't live with plastic, it has to be glass. And the only reason, it's not that Steve Jobs had that opinion, but because he was Steve Jobs, that opinion is the reason there's glass on the iPhone. And so who's going to do that? And who's going to do who's going to say move it over 2 pixels?
Who even has
color of yellow?
Who even has the power to do so?
Right. Even if there was a clone of him with a different name, they don't have the power and influence and adulation of the company. But also to Ryan's, that's one perspective. To Ryan's point, and just to build on what he was saying, I think that when he came back, what he learned next was how to be a kick-ass business leader. And when he came back, he cleaned house. It was the Godfather. He replaced the board, he replaced the executives.
And rightly so.
He didn't hesitate to just put the right people in place.
Today, all the family's business will be done.
Exactly. And so, the Apple of today is it's everybody in that company is there because Steve Jobs.
You bet.
So.
You bet. I'm not sure I'd hold Apple stock right now. That's all I can say. In fact, the stock market doesn't seem to feel that way either. I think they're down quite a bit right now.
Well, they were in the short term. I mean, they'll be back. They'll be fine. Like I said, they've got a couple of years before they really need to start proving that the transition of vision has occurred.
Sure.
And it is that vision. I think.
I'm glad you said it. I think that's great. I hope that's right.
I just, I try to take a long-term view of these things. I mean, if this is not the Apple of the 80s where, there was a huge void in vision and it was just coming from all sides. Absolutely. I think this is a dramatically different and much more organized and far more, personalized to Steve Jobs' vision and way of doing things and way of thinking. I just, if there is going to be something that really falls apart, I don't even think we're going to see it immediately. I think it's going to take a long time for us to get there.
There's one word that explains why you should hang on to your Apple stock, and that word is China. Apple has barely begun its takeover of the Chinese consumer electronics market, and they love Apple stuff in China. Love it so much that they make their own. And not to mention
they have their own Apple stores.
Yeah, exactly. So, but you look at they're not on China Mobile yet officially, and yet the iPhone is the #1 phone. Unauthorized iPhones are the dominant phone on China. Wait till that's a done deal, and the iPads, and I mean it's really China is going to be half the global market, and it hasn't.
That's a very interesting point. And I have to say, I think if there's a next Steve Jobs, he will probably, or she will probably come from China, because the culture there does support that kind of, capitalism and innovation, and I think we might be surprised at who the next Steve Jobs is.
The story that you told about the glass is really interesting to me, and as you were telling the story, and I'd heard before, it just kind of made me think, what if the iPhone had come out and it didn't have glass? It still would have been a huge success. I mean, yes, it would not have been the iPhone exactly as we know today, and yes, the glass is clearly preferable. Yeah. I would not want an iPhone without the glass at this point.
But the iPhone is the result of 100 of those such decisions.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
So, who knows? I mean, it's and I think that's how we're going to see changes. If we do see changes, there'll be little things.
Yeah, it'll be subtle.
There'll be little products will come out and say, people like me will say, Steve Jobs.
Steve would never have done that. Yeah.
I think a big part of it, though, and this is kind of behind the scenes magic, is just that Apple, at the size and the scale and the influence that it has now, can actually make those decisions almost willy-nilly and not have to worry too much about it. I mean, if Samsung were in that position, maybe not Samsung, they're actually really, really big, but take a couple of steps down. If the Motorola was in that position, they might not have the ability to make that decision because they don't have the clout, the resources necessary with manufacturers and materials makers. They don't have the scale to be able to pull something like that off. Whereas Apple actually, yes, we I think we can agree that maybe there isn't an individual who's going to step in and make that decision yet. Maybe it's Ive, maybe it's Cook.
But if they're forced on.
Yeah, whoever it is, if somebody does make that decision, we know that they can execute.
Right.
And that's not something that every consumer electronics manufacturer can say. They just have a scale where they can do whatever they want.
Yeah, they're
limited only by their imagination.
They have a production juggernaut. A very good point. That's limited only by its imagination. I completely agree with you.
Well, and Mike, one of the things about you're saying that people like me will point that out. I think people are going to be lying in wait for the Jobs products, and they'll be hypercritical, and they'll find the 2 pixels, and they'll say, "See, Steve is gone," but the average person may not necessarily see it that way. I agree that Apple is really good in the long term. I think they have about 5 years to run in the momentum of Steve Jobs, and I think after 5 years will be the real test. But Apple has been through a test, and that's also built into their DNA, kind of that failure from the 80s. And you have to remember that when Steve left, when he was kicked out, he already had lost control. It wasn't Steve Jobs' Apple anymore. The Macintosh project was something he had to do because Apple had become too bureaucratic and he had to sneak off to do it.
Right.
And so it long ago had become not Steve's company. And that has changed dramatically. I think they've got about 5 years, and then I think we'll see the real test.
Dwight, you actually make a really good point that I'd like to riff on, which is if you see anybody at a big publication or anything like that say, "Oh, Jobs would never have allowed this" within the next 12 months, they're full of it. They don't know what they're talking about
let's write that down.
You can quote me on this because it's
I can almost guarantee you somebody at this table will say that in the next 12 months during a Mac break. And it may be me and it may not be. But
the pipeline I think is the pipeline is too tight for the next 18 months, maybe 24 on the high side. The next 3-4 products that we see come out, in 2012, they're going to have Steve's fingerprints all over it. If you see any kind of failure with iCloud if iOS 5 is not as great as people want it to be, or if there's like really bad production problems with the iPhone 4S that we don't yet know about because it's not yet out. There's some kind of hardware failure, whatever. If you see anybody say, "Oh, it's because Steve is gone," they are just totally full of it.
Bozos. Because all of those things, by the way, have happened under Steve's watch in the last couple of years.
Absolutely. You have an instant indicator.
Mobile Me. I mean, the white iPhone, we've seen it, even with Steve in the
iTunes for Windows.
iTunes for Windows. That's still a thorn in my side. I want to talk about Samsung, because Samsung did something kind of interesting. Some say classy, some say cynical. We'll talk about it in just a bit. Great panel. Dwight Silver. I almost called you Dwight Schrute. Dwight Schrute from the Houston, from the Houston Chronicle. How's the beef farm going? Mike Elgin from Elgin.com, Computer World, and of course, most importantly, Google Plus. How is the Google Plus? It's not dead, is it?
Oh, no.
All right, because I've been seeing some articles saying Google Plus is dead. Good.
It's awesome.
By the way, while we have been doing this show, I have probably had about 30 to 40 people, according to the email notifications I'm getting, follow me in the circles on Google Plus, probably because of Mike's reference to it, but it's been like a flood since the show started.
They changed their notifications now. They're extended circles only. Is that what it is?
You can go in and it's more granular and all this kind of stuff.
I like it.
Yeah, it's nice.
I wasn't really crazy with the fact that I was getting notifications. Because, well, of course, we have a lot of followers, so that means we were getting a lot of noise in our notifications. But I think this is better. But anyway, that's another story for next segment. Right now, I want to tell you about Squarespace.com, the secret behind exceptional websites. If your website has gone down in the last few months, you maybe should look at Squarespace.com. I'm going to say something very strange, bold, and risky. Squarespace sites never go down. You can't. Maybe you could. I've never seen a Squarespace site be crashed. They're hosted.
Test this?
Go ahead, test it.
No, give us a site to go to.
Go to our Inside Twit blog, inside.twit.tv.
All right, let the fire hose.
Everybody go there right now. Inside, and I'm going to wait 30 seconds, give you a chance to go there, and then I'll see if it loads. How about that? For bold. Here's why. Squarespace is hosting plus software, right? But it's all tightly integrated. They use a very sophisticated. You don't have to do it too. They're all going to go there?
Yeah. We're doing this thing now.
Oh, God.
Leo makes bold claims.
That's a bold claim. They have very sophisticated hosting that, oops, I didn't mean to load that yet. I forgot now, the new Google, is you take the first few letters, it loads the page, like instantly. The new Chrome, have you seen that? Mm-hmm. Okay, I won't type anything for a second. Their Java hosting allows them to throw more bandwidth behind a site very easily, very quickly. It's really remarkable. Squarespace.com, you can try it. This is the other thing that's remarkable. They make it so easy to try it, and that shows a company that's very confident. If you go to squarespace.com, click the green Try It Free button, and all you have to do is come up with a name for your site. That's usually the hardest part. A password, give them your email address, and you're done. You've made a site. You can use all the tools. You've got 2 weeks to really play with it, and if you like it, then go back to Squarespace and sign up. I mean, it's really a great system. Great templates. They've got their iOS and Android apps now, so you can post and moderate from your mobile device. They've got stats just to die for. Very simple plugins for all the social media integration. It just is easy. Oh, and you can import and export from all the major APIs, Movable Type, WordPress, TypePad, and Blogger. So you're never stuck, but you can always get that site moved in. All right, let's try it. Let's just see. I'm going to go right now, watch inside twit.tv. Is it loading? Well,
yeah, loads.
What happened? The Twit Army, you guys have let me down. I guess you can't kill a Squarespace site. It's a little bit slow. I have to say it's a little bit slower. That's YouTube not loading right there. You killed YouTube. You can't kill Squarespace. Look at that. The YouTube video won't load because you're all trying to load it. But Squarespace loaded right away. We love it. I know you will too. Squarespace.com. If you decide to sign up, use the offer code TWIT. They'll take 20% off. What the hell am I doing? Is that a dog?
I think that's Ozzy.
Okay. Squarespace. I'm trying to wear my dog. You know, you can do that with a cat. It doesn't work with a dog. Just word of advice. Don't try it. Squarespace.com. if you decide you want to sign up for a Squarespace account, make sure you use the offer code TWIT10. You see it right at the bottom of the screen, TWIT10, and you will get, they've upped it, 20% off for the first 6 months of your account. That is a great deal. The secret behind exceptional websites, you just can't crash it. Let me tell you something. We can crash any site by doing this live with the Twit Army. These guys can kill any site. We could not kill the site. We might have killed Drupal. But we cannot kill inside.twit.tv. There you go. Squarespace.com. See, I got some guts. I got some nerve. I believe in our products. We've got great sponsors here. So Samsung, I love this story. Go ahead.
Wait. Before we move on,
yes.
I did want to say just one other quick thing about.
Please, I don't want to rush us because this is a huge topic.
You know, I mean, we've talked a lot about Apple, and I have mixed feelings about like doing any media about Steve's passing. It just feels kind of.
You know what
strange.
we did, and this didn't feel strange at all. When it happened, of course, we immediately went into kind of that live coverage. We did it. I stayed here with a bunch of people till 8, and then Eric Lanigan took over and took calls till midnight. And what I felt like was almost awake. It was when something like this happens to our community, and he really was a part of our community. Yeah. There's such grief that it's just valuable to just talk it out. So we weren't trying to analyze it. We weren't trying to say what happens next. We were just talking about our feelings, and that was great.
So there's a swear in this tweet, but I want to pull up a tweet if we could.
Sure.
It's got a bad word in it.
That's okay. Brace yourself,
it's
kids.
From Anil Dash. So it's Anil's latest.
Is he Anil Dash on the Twitter? Anil, of course, was for a long time with Six Apart. I think he left, didn't he?
Yeah.
Where is he now?
He's working on a government project now called something Labs.
Expert Labs. That's right. He brought Gina in, of course.
Yeah. So that top one.
The effed up thing is that every other Fortune 500 CEO thinks people will leave flowers and tributes to their memory after they die too, and that's really true. If you go to any Apple store, there are Post-it notes on the window. There are bit apples. There are candles. This is like when Michael Jackson passed. This is Malik said this. In fact, we asked Om to be on the show, and he said it was too personal for him to talk about. But Om said he's our Elvis. And in a way, I think he is.
Or John Lennon.
It reminded me very much of December 8th.
Closer to John Lennon.
Yeah, it really. Now, John Lennon was killed in violence suddenly, unexpectedly, but it did feel very similar.
Well, see, I think he's our Elvis and our John Lennon, because if he's our Elvis, then who is our John Lennon? I mean, he's the only person in his class of adulation.
And I can't think of a single business leader that anybody would feel this way about.
So, I was thinking a lot about this. Why people feel this way? Why so many people who never met him feel this way? And I think there are a lot of reasons. I personally consider myself very fortunate to have crossed paths with him on a number of occasions.
Did you get to interview him, actually?
I've never gotten to interview him. Very few.
He was anti-press. It was very difficult. Walt Mossberg like the only, and David Pogue. The only guys.
I don't think Pogue has ever actually.
No, he has.
Yes, yeah. Maybe, yeah. People feel the sense of connection with Steve. I think maybe through the keynotes, but I think it actually came most from the products. And I was thinking about why this is, and part of it is Steve's goal with every product that